This is UN News. I'm Conor Lennon, and I'm reporting from Trinidad and Tobago. It's not the toughest of assignments I've been on, I must admit. It's a beautiful place. It's got great beaches, friendly people, a wonderful tourist industry. It really does have a lot going for it. But it also has a big problem, a plastics problem. It's been estimated over 129,000 metric tons of plastic are imported into Trinidad every year. A lot of it is dumped into the rivers, where it washes out into the ocean. Plastic pollution has a detrimental effect on the health and livelihoods of people living in small island states like Trinidad, which often lack the means to effectively treat and process the waste. And that's why the UN is working with local communities on innovative projects to not only deal with that waste, but also find a way to reuse it.
I'm Frank Tilaksing. I'm a physical oceanographer, and right now I'm the environmental director at the Rotary Club of Port of Spain West here in Trinidad.
So explain where we are now.
Sure, we are at the Marval River, which is one of the rivers that drains the Port of Spain, which is the main capital of Trinidad. And it's a thoroughfare of plastic that goes to the sea. We have a lot of plastic pollution in Trinidad and Tobago, and especially in our capitals. And basically, the people who are throwing their plastic out of the cars, on the side of the road, or even sometimes in the river, it flows down with the rain and goes into the sea. And it's causing a great, huge problem because, of course, plastic breaks down into microplastics. Turtles eat plastic bags and get killed, and it's damaging the environment. But not only that, it's also floating out into the sea through the islands in Trinidad and Tobago and into the Caribbean Sea, forming a big plastic pollution there as well.
And what we're looking at now is just one river, the Marval, as you said, and there's a lot of plastic backed up against this boom, which is blocking the plastic from going out into the sea. Huge amounts of water bottles and other detritus and mess that's there. Give me an example of how long it would take for this mess to accumulate.
So this will actually accumulate in less than a week. So it's every time a rain falls, that you'll get a lot of accumulation of plastic. So it's not a steady stream of plastic, but certainly after a rainfall, you will get this. So we, on average, we say every week or 2 weeks, you'll get this level of plastic here in the boom.
Right, and this is just one river. How many other rivers?
Oh, well, there are dozens and dozens of rivers in Trinidad. In the Port of Spain area, there's about 5 major rivers. All having this kind of plastic going on, but they don't have booms. This is the first river in Trinidad that has a boom. So that they will, this is going to be the first project that sort of leads into the other rivers having booms as well.
And visually, it's very striking to see how bad the problem is. And for all the other rivers that don't have the boom, this is just, every week, this is just going straight out.
That's right, straight out into the sea. The sea is right down there, and all the rivers, of course, drain the land into the sea. So Trinidad has a lot of rain, especially during the wet season, and that just simply washes the land, cleans all the plastic from the land, but it has to go somewhere. So it goes into the river, and then that same rainwater takes it down into the sea.
And this is a problem that all island states are facing?
All island states in the Caribbean, especially ones that have a little industrial activity in them. Trinidad is people of Trinidad used to drinking plastic water out of plastic bottles and so on. So we have a long history of plastic use. We don't have a long history of responsible disposal, and that is what the problem is. And so we're trying to educate the public into properly disposing of your plastic, trying to create projects that extract the plastic physically from the environment and put it away so that it doesn't impact on the environment.
What kind of support are you getting for this project?
Right, so this project is one of the first kinds in Trinidad and Tobago. They've never boomed a river in Trinidad. So this project is a pilot test project to see how this type of plastic extraction can work in the rivers. And we were funded by the UN GEF Fund.
That's the Green Environment.
Green Environment Fund, last year, October last year. And they gave us money to buy the boom, do the engineering, do the studies on the river, and to design the river extraction project.
The other thing that's visually striking is the contrast between the dirty side and the clean side. Yeah. When you first put the boom up, you must have been quite encouraged to see that difference.
Very, very much so. We weren't exactly sure if the boom would work, if the plastic will just go over the boom or under it, especially when there's a strong flow of water. But as you can see, it does trap it. The river is not a very deep river, so the plastic boom right now is on the seabed. but most of the time during the high tide and mid tide, it's going to be floating. So water can flow under it, fishes can go under it, and so on. But the floatables, the plastic, some organic material will be trapped by the boom. Our issue is ensuring that the boom is deployed correctly so that it can withstand the occasional very heavy flow caused by rains. And the boom, the shape of the boom is very important to us because we created the shape and a diagonal to the flow of the river so that when plastics do come and they trap in the boom, it's sent to one side, allowing easy access to extract.
And as we've been speaking, just in the last few minutes, there I can see loads more bottles and cups coming down the river, becoming trapped in the boom. And you have a couple of your guys who are getting ready. You've been waiting patiently for
Yes,
us
they're going to extract
everything. So maybe you just let them get on with it, Frank. Let's get out their way.
Yeah, you can carry on.
So we've seen how we can get the plastic out of the rivers and also the potential for this project to scale up to many more rivers across Trinidad and Tobago. But what happens next? Well, to answer that question, I have with me Dr. Shada Mahabir, an environmental expert at the UN Development Programme in Trinidad and Tobago. You've been involved in supporting projects for the next stage, and you call it upcycling. So explain to me what that means.
Upcycling is basically taking waste plastics and producing another value-added product from the waste plastics that can, on its own itself, have a benefit to communities as well as the country at large.
And there are two ways of doing that in your projects. Yes. There is the plastic lumber process. Let's talk about that first of all. So when we say plastic lumber, what are we talking about?
So plastic lumber is where we take waste plastics of different types, not just plastic bottles, but we also want to use HDPE, which is high density bottles like bleach bottles, fabric softener bottles, plastic bags, and we combine all of these different types of plastics into an extruded product which is called plastic lumber. It looks like wood, it is stronger than wood, and is really good in terms of a construction material, and we are actually in front.
Yes, this is none of this is wood. This is all plastic.
Right.
Well, we went to the factory to find out. It was about an hour's drive from where we are right now, and we spoke to the factory manager, who's Juan Andrade, and he showed us in a bit more detail what it all means.
We are at the headquarters of Flying Tree Environmental Management, and basically this is part of our operation where we capture all the plastics of the environment and put them together and sequester them before they become microplastics.
Right, so it's, yeah, like you said, it's bigger than a microplastic. You can actually see it. It's not going to be, you can't swallow it. It's too big. And what's special about this plastic? It's the fact that this can't be recycled and you can't make money from this, right?
You cannot make money for this, and because it's not economically feasible to do a business with it, normally ending up in the landfills or ending up in the sea as garbage. And they will decompose into microplastics that will endanger the human life. Okay, so we try to capture that process before it happens.
But it won't break down, it won't degrade, it's going to be, it's going to be toxic. So what you've done here is you've taken all these bottles we've seen, not just bottles, but bits of cars, plastic material which comes from a factory.
There is very interesting that the plastics actually coming from pre-consumer, post-consumer. All the materials that cannot be recycled in the normal recycling plant.
So normally this would just be junk. This would go to landfill, or it would be burned.
It will be burned, it will catch fire, it will degrade into microplastics, and because of the location of the landfill in the Caribbean, we are islands, normally the water, the leach and the microplastic will end up in the water tables, will end up in the sea in a very short time, because in the Caribbean especially, we have perfect conditions for plastic degradation. We have perfect temperature, we have humidity, we have microorganisms, and we have a lack of resources to do better recycling as an economically viable item. So because of that, is the perfect soup to create microplastics.
And what is different with what you're doing? So after you've broken it down, as you say, it's larger than a microplastic. What are you going to do with all of this multicolored plastic you have here?
Okay, we're going to get all the plastics. Some of them definitely will melt or flow in a very low temperature before actually anything could be gasified. So we avoid gasification, and we put all together in a extruder with control heat.
Right.
And we're going to make it into something looking like a plasticine, and that intrude into a mold.
Right. Okay.
Go into cooling water, we let it cool at normal temperature, and then we take the molded plastic that was all stick together like a glue.
So you call that like plastic lumber,
Plastic lumber.
and it looks like wood
And
you're
that
on.
is what we're going to see just now.
Oh, let's take a
We're
look.
going to see that in the next process.
Okay, great. Let's see. There you go. That was Juan Andrade from Flying Tree Environmental Management at the plastic lumber factory in Arima. He's not shy at all, is he? He can talk all day about his favorite subject,
Yes.
plastic lumber. A very interesting guy. And yes, right behind us here, this greenhouse which has been constructed recently. None of this is wood, right? This is all plastic.
That's correct. All waste plastic from Trinidad and Tobago. So we've been able to convert our own waste plastics into a usable product. The importance of this is because as a small island and a developing state, we must remember that we have one limited space for storage of waste. So we must find ways in which we can deal with the plastics so it does not take up space in our landfills. And as a developing state, we are always looking at for new opportunities to strengthen our economy. And this is by far one of the more possible opportunities for the Caribbean, because as we are familiar, much of the Caribbean uses a lot of plastics. But there are very few options available to the Caribbean to deal with it. And we are developing one that we hope to extend to the rest of the Caribbean as a service until we can find or solve the plastic solution problem in the long term. For now, we know that there is an estimate of 1 million tons of plastic per person on the world right now. That's the estimate, right? So we want to be able to address that is already present in our environment. What can we do out of this to make it sustainable so it does not convert into microplastics and becomes a threat to our health, etc.
Well, we've talked about plastic lumber, and there's another use for this waste plastic. Concrete, or you call it sequestered concrete.
Yes.
So tell me about that process, and well, it's where we are now, so give us a bit more information about this concrete and what it can be used for.
All right. So concrete sequestration is a really long, complicated way of saying that we are using cement and concrete to trap the plastics within it in order to prevent it from continuing to be a pollutant in the environment. Now, what we were able to do through this project was to afford the knowledge of how to do concrete sequestration to a vulnerable women's group in Manzanilla, which is where we are right now. So we provided training to these women on being able to collect plastics from the beach and as well from their own communities, and then process these plastics in such a way that they could make products out of it. They're making plant pots, they're making benches, they're making pavers. And then, of course, they are now going to use that as an alternative income for themselves. But more importantly, they are taking the plastic that would naturally turn into microplastics and become a threat to our health. They're converting that into products where the plastic is trapped on the inside so it can't get out.
Well, let's find out a bit more from them about the whole process.
The reason for getting this group started is because of the poverty level in my community. I want to empower women by being financially sustainable for themselves and their family. We are more a farming community. We are located at the east of Trinidad. Farmers use a lot of pesticides and fungicides where they have a lot of waste plastic containers. We see it fit with the plastic upcycling that it will eradicate some of the pollution in the area. People burn, it pollutes the air. So we're trying to keep a natural environment, a clean environment. We're also educating the community on how to dispose their plastics. That's why we will collect a lot of plastics here at the center, so they know that there is a place they can dispose their plastics. So every month we have about 50 to 60 huge bags turn up here. We collect the plastics, we have to clean them, and we grind them in the machine. And then we mix it into the concrete, sand, gravel, and we make it. So we make it into benches, flower pots, stepping stone, Lego blocks, name it. For me, it's everywhere you turn, you see plastic. And it hurts me very badly to see that, you know, the amount of plastic we collect, we know people are being educated. They are getting the message. So that's the difference. We see less plastic in our community.
Omati Rampasad from the Kernaham Women's Group, which is the space we're in right now. Look, let's just go back to the bigger picture. You touched on it earlier. Obviously, the ultimate aim, what we all want, is for people to be reducing their plastics pollution. We've had a lot of UN campaigns to stop the kind of plastic use. I was quite struck. Well, first of all, I was overwhelmed by the amount of plastic I've seen so far. The amount of plastic that is just turning up from factories, from all of these products that can't be recycled. Most of the plastic can't be recycled. And the amount of time it takes for some of this plastic to break down, it could be up to 1,000 years, which blew my mind. But then if it does break down, that's also a problem. When we spoke to Juan earlier, the factory manager was saying that he has a friend who has a company that makes plastic bags, and they have added a material to help the plastic bags degrade more quickly. But he's been saying, well, and he should know, he's a scientist, he says, this is actually worse because you're creating tiny, tiny pieces of microplastics, which are harmful for our livelihoods, harmful for animals. You said that the point was to deal with this short-term problem now, to try and make something useful from all this waste, but I presume that longer-term education is a big part of the process to try and get people to actually massively reduce the amount of plastic that they are using and mismanaging.
Agreed. The long-term goal is to try to see if we can get people to stop using as much plastics as they do, especially in Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, as I've explained to you and you've seen for yourself, plastic is a bit of a culture in our country. And I spoke to you that plastic is a solution for something else. And the problems that we have in other places, for example, a lot of people suffer from poor water quality, so they prefer to buy bottled water over being able to use the tap water that we are provided with. They don't think it's safe. So because of that, the cultural behavior that has developed over 30, 40, 50 years, it has been extremely difficult to directly change the behavior of the culture of the people, even though we've been doing education since the 1980s. Okay? What we want to be able to do is continue the education, yes, but we want to show people that plastics are not really the solution for the pollution. Right? We need to look down the road. We want to do the education, but we want to do the research and development. Maybe there's some plant, some tropical tree or some tropical shrub that could be converted into a biodegradable plastic. So we want to be also encourage the younger generation to consider doing the sciences that are required in order to be able to develop potential alternatives to plastics. But until those alternatives are properly developed, we still have that problem of what is already being created and consumed. And that needs to be addressed. Actually, within the program and the projects that we have supported the development of alternatives.
And of course, we need to talk about the economic angle. There's a lot of unemployment in Trinidad. I was wondering, how can you make money from this? Is this something that could be a generator of jobs for people? Is it sustainable? Is there a widespread call for this kind of lumber that we can see here?
Right. Since it's starting production in Trinidad and Tobago, every piece of plastic lumber that the factory has that has been developed and made has actually been sold. And that has actually helped the factory to be able to support more livelihoods for more persons within the factory space itself, which is a plus. It has its economic opportunities. In terms of scalability and for the Caribbean, I've already had conversations with my colleagues in Antigua and Barbuda. Guyana is very interested in this sort of technology sharing, but also the possibility of being able to also develop smaller systems like what we have here in Manzanilla. Now, this particular project in Manzanilla is extremely important because everything in here is movable, right down to the building.
And as we speak, we are talking just a few months before a big global plastic treaty, which is being convened by the United Nations. What difference do you think that's going to make on the ground?
On the ground, it depends on how the treaty actually goes. there's a lot of resistance that we've always seen, globally between the plastic producers and, of course, the environmental conservators. There is that. But the thing is, as someone who is an environmental person, working with industry, as working with communities, etc., I think there is a possible middle ground. And I would like to see this treaty be able to reflect that, the ability to work together and to be able to not be, I'm not going to say encourage more plastic producers to pollute, but be able to find a middle ground where there's some sort of understanding that if they do the pollution, that these are the measures that need to be taken in place, and this is what they're responsible for.
Well, hopefully a good consensus solution will be found and that the treaty will make a real difference. We'll of course be covering that on UN News. Yeah. Dr. Shada Mahabir, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And now I think we should get out of this very hot sun.
I agree.
Okay.